Welcome to the Nashville Money Guys podcast show thingy that we're doing here on YouTube. The reason I say that, if you haven't watched before, is because normally I'm with two other gentlemen that are a part of Nashville Money Guys. We are a hard money lending company out of Nashville, Tennessee. Basically, what we do is lend on fix and flips for people who typically can't go get bank money because either the flip is, much larger, like the rehab is much larger, or people they need to move quickly. So that's what we're really good at. So the reason that I say podcast is what's typically happened, we're normally talking. Today, what we're going to talk about is reviewing this video. I'm going to kind of do a commentary on one of the most ridiculous, crazy things that's going on in the country right now, which is squatters. No need to belabor this before we get into it. Let's just start rolling. This is a story out of Illinois. And stick with me till the end, because literally the recommendations that they come up with at the end of this program are staggeringly stupid. And I want to talk through each one of those. So let's go.
We begin now with an update to a Channel 2 Action News investigation. A local Army officer is back in her DeKalb County home tonight, a week after we told you about how a squatter had moved in and was living in her place.
That is a nice neighborhood. That is not like some janky, neglected neighborhood. That is a super nice house. And an Army officer.
Well, the woman's crediting Channel 2 consumer investigator Justin Gray for getting her back in her home. And Justin with us, and that squatter is now behind bars.
Well, Justin, normally homeowners are told they have to go through the eviction process, which can take months. That's what Lieutenant Colonel Delia Duray was initially told by DeKalb police earlier this month. But after our Channel 2 Action News story aired, the DeKalb Sheriff's Office contacted her and said they will circumvent that process with something called an intruder affidavit.
All right, so under normal circumstances, and that has been this way for literally centuries in this country, you had to basically act like the tenant was a tenant. This trespasser, this squatter, fell under certain provisions in the law that required that you file for an eviction to kick them out. Now, obviously, this is going to be changing across the country relatively soon. Maybe not in some states. It's going to be really interesting to see what the more progressive states do, like California and New York. Are they going to just kind of let these laws linger on the books? Florida has also already changed it, where basically they have designated tenants and squatters. And squatters are under the criminal family, which makes total sense. That's the only thing that's logical in modern times. And at the end, I'll briefly comment on why squatters' laws are even on the books at all, and why it makes sense when you rewind to the birth of the country. But now it makes absolutely zero sense anymore.
If it was for Channel 2, Justin Gray, I wouldn't be here today, and I'm truly grateful.
Look at all the stuff pulled out of this DeKalb County house. The alleged squatter, Vincent Simon, had only been in the home a matter of weeks, but you can see he had really moved in. Even his dogs had to be carted out. Our Channel 2 Action News photographer was there, camera rolling, as Simon was moved out of Lieutenant Colonel Delia Duray's Ellenwood home by order of an intruder affidavit.
Just as I finished renovating.
So remember that, an intruder affidavit.
You leisurely moved in. Like it's yours. No, I was not going to let this go.
It was 1 week ago that Lieutenant Colonel Duray first reached out to Channel 2. She put her home up for sale while away on Army active duty in Chicago when this convicted criminal moved in, putting up beware of dog signs and cardboard in the windows, claiming he had a lease. Duray was told by police she would have to take him to court and go through a formal eviction process.
I felt violated.
As you should.
Had I not been serving my country, I would have been in my home.
But this week, Duray got to see Simon led out of the house in cuffs.
Vincent, your time is up.
It feels good when you can return the home back to their homeowner.
Police found a gun and suspected ecstasy.
You see how many officers are there? The officers and then a moving company are typically who's showing up to actually do a set out. The amount of resources it takes to do that are staggering. So you imagine if you just extrapolate that out over not just 5 or 6, but in some states, they're saying that there are thousands of houses that are currently being squatted in. And it takes that amount of people to do a set out. Yeah.
in the home. You can see the giant gun safe Simon had brought in. As a convicted felon, he legally cannot have a firearm.
He attempted to show us the lease. That's not what the law allows.
Normally, showing a bogus lease or even just claiming to have a lease is enough to get a squatter case kicked to a months-long court battle.
You want to have protections of tenants, but you don't want protection of squatters.
DeKalb County Attorney John Ernst has been fighting a similar squatter case for a client since February and says these cases regularly drag on for months with delays both in the courts and with the marshals. His client still isn't back in his home.
It's been 3 months since they were moved in, and we'll probably have at least another month and a half.
4.5 months. Even for a standard eviction to take 4.5 months is crazy. Like the arrangement where I provide housing and you provide money and you stopped providing money, so therefore I'm going to stop providing housing. For that to take 4.5 months by itself is Looney Tunes. Maybe there are certain circumstances where that could make sense. Like maybe if the landlord is not taking care of like major problems in the actual house. But even then, I feel like, I don't know, that exception is such a small part of the law. But the fact that these people squatting are considered tenants is just absolute. My mind is just I've watched like 3 or 4 of these videos this morning trying to pick one to comment on. Everyone is just so ridiculous. And the people that decided to move into somebody else's house and just be like, yeah, I'm just going to move into their house. Like, what? What? How is that even a thing? Like, they know where you are. You are committing a crime, and they know where you are because the crime that you are committing is stealing someone's house without actually moving it. Let's continue.
The sheriff's office bypassing that eviction process, DeRay now has her house back.
I came here with a mission in mind to get him out of my house and put him in jail where he belongs.
And mission accomplished for Lieutenant Colonel DeRay. The attorney we talked to, John Ernst, he's also the mayor of Brookhaven and says he has been looking at this on the public policy side.
Stick with me. This is where it's about to get real stupid.
Obviously, the DeKalb sheriff stepping in here with that intruder affidavit sped up all of this for Lieutenant DeRay by definitely weeks and likely months, Justin.
Justin Gray, well done. Thank you. Now, there are ways to protect your property from squatters. Some of the easiest things that you can do is to secure all entrances to your property. Also, post signs saying no trespassing. You can hire a property management company to carry out regular home inspections, and they can help you find a desirable tenant to make sure that there are no squatters on your property.
Secure your entrances. Like, okay, fair. But if somebody notices that your home is vacant, how difficult do you think it is for them to... Okay, all right, no, let's not make that... That's fair. No trespassing signs? Like, for some reason, if you don't post the fact that this is not your property, that they would somehow have a right, or somehow they show up and there's a no trespassing sign and they're like, oh man, there's a no trespassing sign. We were going to do it, but now there's a sign. So clearly we shouldn't. This is so stupid. Regular home inspections. So I have to make sure that somebody is looking at my house to just ensure that no one is moving into it and therefore would then have rights. Find a reliable tenant. So find an actual occupant to occupy the house so that someone can't come in. All right. Those are, maybe some of them are valid recommendations, but all of them are stupid given the context of why they're being delivered here, which is you should be able to have your property vacant if you want, for as long as you want, and no one break into it. And if someone breaks into it, the punishment should be swift, and it should fit the level of the crime, which is a person is using something that does not belong to them, and they won't give it back to you. All right, let's dive in to. I want to talk briefly about the history of squatting, why I understand why some of those laws would have been on the books initially and why they all need to be wiped out at this point. When the country had lower population, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, and I watched another video where basically they were doing squatting rights in England. During the World Wars, And when they were having issues with basically transferring title and keeping deeds and the records of deeds, what they wanted to do was essentially speed up the process for people to claim houses and to claim farms and to claim land so that they could essentially start to rebuild, or in the sense of America, build, since we were kind of coming from not zero, but sort of zero at the founding of European America. When they did that, they brought in something called squatters' rights, which it was never intended that it was somebody who was going to be stealing something from someone that they wanted. It was essentially something where they would move into a land and they would start to maintain it. And there's a lot of rules that talk about the maintenance of the land. So like a farming land or fixing up a house, where basically they were trying to rejuvenate an area. But because they didn't have these chains of title like we have now, where we've got like files on computers. I mean, you think about 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, depending on what country we're talking about, paper files that could very well have just been destroyed. So they were essentially starting over again. And the term squatter, the way we think about it, is kind of a criminal. This should not be the case now. Like, obviously, with the modernization of the chain of title and all those things, there should be no squatters' rights. I should be able to have my property vacant for as long as I want to have my property vacant, as long as I'm not affecting other people around me. So, like, if I've got my front yard and it's 3 feet tall and I've got, like, just bugs and rabbits and all sorts of other animals that are, like, leeching onto my neighbor's properties, I get it. That should be a codes thing where codes is able to come in and say, we're going to cut your grass and you're going to have to pay for it. And then, they can put liens on the house, all that kind of stuff. But under no circumstance should there ever be a case where somebody can move into the house and take away my private property that I have paid for under any circumstances. Like, I think that most logical people could agree, especially in the United States in 2024, that is the case. In Florida, they have recently recategorized this, and they have basically taken squatters outside of the realm of like you are a renter, and they have moved them over into the category of you are a criminal. So they have sped it up. Now, here's where I can see some issues happening. And we've owned a property management company for a long time in Nashville. And we have seen this happen, where essentially one of the frauds that occurs is somebody will basically figure out how to get into one of our properties, and they will either change the locks or they will get a key, somehow they'll either come check it out from the office or however they've obtained the key. They'll make a copy, and then they'll take out a separate ad, and then they'll basically have a tenant through them come look at the property. So again, this person doesn't own the property. What they're doing is basically acting like they own or manage the property, allowing a person who is just like a legitimate renter wanting to move into the property. They will give this person who has no rights to the property like a deposit or first month's rent. And typically it's much lower. So like we remember one of the houses we were trying to rent for $2,200. And I think that the person had basically rented it for like $500. So clearly a massive discrepancy. And the person knew when we started having the conversation with them, like, yeah, I kind of had an idea that this might be fraudulent. So we've taken steps since this has started happening, and it hasn't happened often. We've taken some steps to make sure that it doesn't happen by basically, putting a lot of information on the actual house, like stickers on the door that say, hey, you're not dealing with somebody on the internet. If you're not dealing with this office, you could be a victim of fraud. But imagine being the person who paid the $500, moved all your stuff into the house. You have a lease. Like, even though it's a fake lease, you have something and you go, no, I am not a squatter. I have a valid lease with the person that I paid, but I didn't know that they didn't own the house or that they didn't manage the house, and they did not have a right to give me that lease. So for that person, I have a little more sympathy. That is a tough one, because that's obviously, to me, not a criminal. That's somebody who was duped, unfortunately. That person still needs to fall under the category of squatter in terms of how quickly they are made to move out of the home. Because I still don't think that you should punish the person who owns the house in theory, this person has recently moved in, and it should be said, hey, I'm really sorry that you were a victim of fraud, but this has to go back to the original owner. We need you out in 72 hours. And then the person who did the fraud, that person should absolutely be charged with a felony, because anything over $500 in the state of Tennessee is a felony. And their intention was to defraud this person for what, more than just the deposit? I would assume that maybe there was a chance that that person could actually continue to pay this person if we weren't paying attention. Maybe it was a couple of months that they were actually getting payments. So I can see that the gray in that area. But for a person who just moves into a house knowing that it's not theirs, and they say, I have a lease, and they know that it's fake, yeah, that person goes straight to jail. Straight to jail. It's going to be interesting to see how many more of these squatter things come up in the United States over the next little while before legislation gets changed. If you're interested in a hard money loan, if you want to learn more about how to flip houses, please subscribe to the channel. Check us out at NashvilleMoneyGuys.com. Again, we're a hard money lending company based out of Nashville, Tennessee. My name is Brandon McDonald, and thank you for watching.